When I was filling out the application for the Wendy's High School Heisman Award, I didn't really know that much would come.
It's teamwork. You communicate with...
What that involves is making sure I communicate and coordinate with each of the guidance departments.
We're building a ramp for someone who really
Don't
can't...
give up just because it's hard, because I had a lot of times where I thought I wasn't going to make it.
Hi, welcome to Hometown Heroes. I'm your host, Andy Kitzrow. Joining me today virtually on Zoom is Nkongho. Nkongho, tell me about yourself and what you have been up to these last several years since the last time we spoke in an official capacity.
Oh man, so 2011, I graduated from Nkongho High School, went to the University of Maryland, College Park to study journalism and Spanish. Worked for a science organization doing some science writing and did a little bit of public relations, and then went to grad school at Johns Hopkins to study mass communication. And now I am working as a social media manager for my organization, and I'm focusing on writing engaging copy and blogs in 250 characters or less.
Yeah, we'll keep it quiet and keep it short. 250. So that's a lot. It's been 10 years. You've more education, and then it sounds like you've started your own thing. Let's start from the beginning and work our way forward, if that's okay. So, graduated high school, went to University of Maryland. Is that right?
Yep.
So tell me about what college was like. Was it what you were expecting it to be like? Give me a rundown of how that was.
Sure. College kind of felt like I was a small fish in a big pond, whereas in high school I was like a big fish in a little pond. Everyone sort of knew who I was, and I was really involved. And in college, you're in this environment where like everyone is valedictorian and everyone has good grades and everyone's super involved. And so, being around so many people who are driven like you was, super encouraging, and it sort of forced me to think more, worldly and to be a little bit more well-rounded, because I was forced to be in an environment with new people I'd never met before. And so it was challenging because I went to a really, really big school, but I think studying journalism, I was able to take a little bit more smaller classes, and to learn from students who are in my classes. And I'm just grateful for that experience, because I think it's helped me, be a little bit more tolerant and introspective. And so it was an all-around good experience.
Yeah, I remember, I went to a big university school too, and just thinking of how my graduating class was like the same size as some of my intro ed classes, where you're like, oh, I graduate 200 people, and this class has 200 people in it. So it's definitely just an adjustment period. But you decided to not stop at 4 years. You decided to go into graduate school at Johns Hopkins. A little bit more of the same. What did you get your master's in?
I got my master's in corporate communications.
Okay.
With a focus on nonprofits and digital.
So was the goal always where you're at now, or did you have a different path, but then you kind of landed where you are now? Want to do your own thing?
Yeah, it's weird, because I studied journalism because I originally wanted to be like, female Woodward and Bernstein, do these investigative pieces. And then the 2016 election happened, and we saw sort of the narrative that was happening around, news. And so I wanted to transition more to the business side of news, and producing more like non-biased content. And so I decided to study communications just generally, because I thought it would be helpful to have, an advertising, a marketing background. But I never ever thought I'd be in the position where I am now, because I didn't really know that there was sort of a name for what I do now. Like being a social media manager, it really does encompass all marketing, communications. It's a lot of writing. And I feel really lucky, because this is a position that I didn't think I would have for another 5 or 10 years. But I think having that foundation of a journalistic guy and being, a good writer sort of helped me come into this particular side of communications a little bit more.
How has the last, I don't know, I guess going on 9 months impacted your line of work and what you did with, like, now everybody's virtual, this distance, even kind of going through an election cycle where you had disinformation or you might have had some interesting things, social media playing a large factor. And so you had two, you had the pandemic and you had a very, I'll just use the word interesting election that presented itself this year. So how did that impact your career and what you do on a day-to-day?
Yeah, I think for my position in social media, it's really important to always see the good in people and to see the big picture. Because, with the pandemic, a lot of people were out of work, people are stressed, people are going, online because that's where they have communities and that's where they can sort of, get their voice heard and say, this is what's going on. And I think it's important to keep that in mind because oftentimes people can perceive social media, especially Twitter, as being a little bit more negative. But the truth is when you have those day-to-day interactions, you realize, okay, like people are human and it makes sense that people feel the need to, complain or express themselves on social media. And so it's made me more tolerant, I think. It's given me a lot of thick skin because, understanding politics and understanding the world makes you understand, why people might be feeling a certain way. And it also gives you the knowledge of, how can we fix things? And using social media is a good way to get people to be open about things they want to talk about. And that can be a great way to spark change, whether it's within your organization or politics or things like that.
You brought up something that the idea of the small fish in the big pond, big fish in the little pond. Has social media made the pond bigger or smaller for people who have now kind of migrated into more of a digital footprint?
I think it's definitely made it bigger. It's tricky. There's so many positive and negatives with just things being more digital, but being able to connect with anyone anywhere and being able to find any piece of information you need from anyone anywhere has been incredibly beneficial.
Now, understanding what your role is, last time we talked, you're a high schooler and now you're an adult, I guess, what have you learned along the way about who you are and how you take the information that you have and then, disseminate it, knowing that people are going to listen, read, digest, and then make opinions or make decisions based off of what you're putting out?
That's an interesting question.
And maybe I can rephrase it as what might have been like, hey, let me just say, and this is me overgeneralization, something that might have just been a quick message when I was younger may have, now people are listening to what you were saying more than you just commenting on it. They may be taking some direction from you, so your words may have a little bit more weight to them, or they may be valuing some of that stuff a little bit more. And has that changed as the way in which you decide what you choose to write and how you choose to share information? Has that changed over as you've gotten older on your decision making through that process? Maybe that's a better way to phrase it.
Oh, absolutely. I think having a journalism background teaches you to really listen to what people are saying, because ultimately you can't write a good story and, give people a good digest or summary of what's happening if you don't understand yourself. So when I was a reporter, I would always ask my sources, this is a little bit complicated, so can you explain it to me the way that you'd explain it to your parents or, your neighbor or something that's going to be more relatable? And I think being able to write in a relatable way for different audiences in a way that they're going to understand and digest it is something that I learned along the way in my career.
Thinking about your career and career advancement, and then you also mentioned earlier about wanting to have like trying to go as more nonpartisan or bipartisan as possible with your writing. How has that been difficult based off of kind of the current climate with its kind of this binary, you're either here or you're here, and in the middle, not a lot of that may not sell, it may not be as exciting to read about, it's not as prolific. Just your thoughts on that whole arena.
It's incredibly difficult, but I think it's important to remind yourself that at the heart, people are good people, and we all just want the same things. You know, we want to be able to support our families. We want, you know, our values to be, you know, thought of as important by other people. We all want to feel like we belong. And if you can work really hard to just focus on that fact, I think it makes things a lot easier. I think it's really easy for us to get to a space where we categorize people, especially with having two political parties, when in reality, things are much more on a spectrum, and people tend to look at issues individually, or at least that's how it should be. And so I think it's important to not categorize people and to always think that, you know, just try and see the best in other people if you can, because that helps a lot.
I agree with that. It's, you know, surface level people may look similar or dissimilar to you, but you should probably get to know the person before you cast judgment. And just because they shared it doesn't mean like it's gospel to them either. So one other thing that's interesting though is, you know, you said it's 250 characters or 250 words or less is your sweet spot. What did you say earlier?
I think I said characters, but I meant to say words.
Okay. So in 250 words or less, what would you tell yourself, your freshman self going into college? You meet yourself freshman year, first day of school. What are you telling yourself?
Oh my gosh.
250 words or less.
Okay. First thing I would say is have fun. Do not care about your grades. Meet as many people as you can and get uncomfortable. That's what I would say. I was way too focused on school, and I was way too focused on getting good grades. And here we are in a pandemic, and really none of that kind of matters. What matters are the relationships that you have. You know, life is far too short. We're going to be working for the rest of our lives. So just try to meet people and have a good time.
Great. So sticking with that vein, you know, what have you learned about yourself? I'd like to dive into that a little bit over the last, you know, from a student to a graduate student to a previous career to your career now. What have you learned about yourself and how you handle adversity or challenges or any of those tough situations?
Wow, I think I've learned a lot about myself. Just to go back to the Youth Leadership Academy that I did in high school and being a part of Kids of Honor, you know, I grew up super duper insecure, and I never felt like I really had a place. And so having role models like George Whitehead at Salisbury University and Paula Morris telling me like, you know, I think you're special, I think you're smart. And maybe I didn't necessarily see that in myself, but hearing it from other people who you look up to sort of makes you think, okay, maybe I should look into this a little bit more. And I think having that foundation in my community, even though I wasn't, you know, getting it at home or with friends, it sort of has now come full circle where I always remember that there is something special and good about me, and I should, you know, pay attention to that. And I have the confidence now a little bit to be a little bit more introspective and to feel like, okay, I'm maybe going through a tough time, but you know, I went through tough times in the past, and I do have a support system. And I think having that foundation early at a time when I was insecure has been, you know, an incredibly important in how I'm seeing myself and how I handle challenges now.
That's great. Yeah, I was going to jump into that high school time. You know, you were very active with a lot of great programs and activities that really paved a way to a successful future. And glad you touched on that stuff. And unfortunately, some people don't get those opportunities and don't have even those mentors. You know, I think about, imagine your senior year in high school doing it all virtually and not being able to maybe participate in the youth action team or Kids of Honor in the same capacity, and everything was kind of done in this kind of socially distanced virtual setting, and how that might have maybe negatively impacted you. So thinking about that, what do we tell those high school kids now who are trying to navigate, whether they're juniors or seniors, navigate what was supposed to be really fun in this, you know, the highlights of their high school career has now been, you know, just kind of thrown up in the air and are unsure of next steps? Like, what do we tell those people?
Yeah, I think one of the good things about a lot of things being virtual right now is that you have access to communities online. You know, maybe a kid who was like me and was feeling sort of out of place can now, you know, go online and I don't know, Google their favorite activity and then find their community that way. And that can sort of build the confidence that they need to feel like, okay, you know, I'm having a hard time virtually right now, but I do have a community who's rooting for me and who's giving me the confidence to get me to do whatever I need to do. And I think it's really important for particularly students who are in high school and who might feel like they're losing out on you know, the classic school experience, to remember that, you know, we are all in this together and this too shall pass eventually. And, you know, take this time to learn a new hobby, to do something offline that you enjoy, because we may not have the time to do the things that we love once the pandemic is over.
Yeah, it's really given me an opportunity to kind of slow down a little bit, because with things being shut down or being more forced at home, or you know, I've had to turn more inwardly, and I've been able to experience a lot of great moments with my kids who are 1 and 4, which I probably would never have had to be able to do that had I been go in the office. So I think there's that kind of blessing in disguise when you think about the situation we're in. So COVID passes, we move on from COVID. What are the next steps in the Nkongho's life? What are the goals here in the next 5 years for you?
Oh, that's a big question. And
I like big questions.
Look ahead, because as you said, you know, COVID has made all of us sort of slow down and reassess. And for me, I've been doing a lot of self-reflection, been taking a lot of therapy, and, you know, I realized that I was one of those people who was just very go, and who was constantly doing things to please other people. And I'm weirdly stable now in my life, and I'm at a point where I'm saying, okay, am I really happy? Am I really enjoying what I'm doing? Who am I really? And I'm learning new hobbies that I never really took the time to learn about before the pandemic, and I really am taking things one day at a time. So, it's hard to say what, you know, things are going to be looking like 5 years, because we don't even know if we're going to be, you know, still working from home in 5 years. So that's a tough question to answer.
Yeah, we hope we're not all working from home, but I do think there is an interesting take. You know, I work with the city of Salisbury on us. What will remain? What will continue to be here that we earlier didn't think was going to be around at the end as a result of COVID? You know, everything from teleworking policies to transforming the workspace and what it truly looks like. So it's going to be interesting to see what sticks. Even a hybrid education system that still has some potential post-COVID to exist in some capacity, whether it's tutoring or an additional learning. So I'm gonna be interested to see what remains. But I think it's also short-sighted to think that COVID-19 will be the last of its kind to this degree, and that we should understand and systematically decide how we're going to handle these things moving forward. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
So kind of switching topics a little bit, going back, Youth Leadership Academy, Kids of Honor, a couple activities you had in your past that really sharpened your leadership skills and asked you to be kind of that leader among your peers and empowered you to help make decisions. Did you have more of those occasions or instances in college or grad school that, or just personally, that those initial activities may have helped guide you through that or get you through?
Are you asking if I had similar activities?
Similar experiences or anything maybe from those activities that you were able to use, skills or things you learned through those experiences that helped you along kind of in those college years when you're still trying to figure out how to be independent?
Yeah, in college, I joined Greek life, and I was an officer in Greek life, and I think I wouldn't have had the confidence to become an officer in Greek life if I didn't have the planning experience that I had when I was doing Youth Leadership Academy. Because the interesting thing about that program at the time is, we were basically chaperoned, but people said, just do what you feel comfortable. This is your program. You guys are going to be doing all the planning. And it was sort of scary to have that much control, but, we were a great bunch of kids and we were able to plan things out and make it happen. And I think in college, when I had that experience in Greek life where because I had already sort of been thrown into planning something, I sort of already knew what steps needed to be taken, who, like the kinds of individuals who would, be other great people to have this leadership position. And so I think sort of being thrown at a situation and being told, okay, make it work and we're here to support you, but really you have the confidence to do it yourself if you need to, is sort of a transferable skill that I used when I was in college.
Great. I never did Greek life, but a lot of my good friends more in the Greek life thing. And it is definitely a path through the university system. It does make large universities smaller. It's a little more bite-sized. You've got good groups of people around you that you form, lifelong relationships with. Anything in particular through that experience that you're allowed to talk about on camera that kind of still sticks with you, years after that undergrad experience?
Yeah, I would say the importance of just building lifelong relationships and being able to get along with anyone. And that's something that's hard to learn until you're sort of thrown in the situation where you do have to work with people who maybe think differently from you, maybe have different learning styles than you. But again, just sort of coming to a place where you say, okay, we're all here for a common goal. Let's maybe put our differences aside and let's just work towards a common goal. And that is something that I think has benefited me, not just in school, but also in work.
So one of the reflecting things I want to go over, I know you have a 10-year reunion coming up in the spring. And had we had regular situations and you were able to meet with everybody, I don't know what it necessarily would look like. But what is that same conversation you're going to have over and over again with everybody when people say, hey, Nkongho, what have you been up to? What are you doing? How's life? What, in 250 words or less, what are you telling people? What's been going on in your world?
Since COVID, that makes things just so incredibly tricky because I think 2020 has disrupted everything. And so it's almost like it's going to be hard to look to the past, I guess, because, all those happy memories that you have, things have just changed so much. Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. I'm just trying to think of, what a 2021 reunion will look like. And I like my response will be different depending on whether I'm speaking to students versus like my teachers from then.
Right.
Yeah, so it's tricky.
Yeah, I definitely think 2020 is people waiting for this year to end. And it's going to be one for the record books. There's a lot have happened. People think like a decade worth of stuff has happened in 1 year, and it's definitely been a trying year, but also an exciting year, as we mentioned. A lot of self-reflection, a lot of opportunity for self-growth, and leaning on each other for support mentally and emotionally. So I think there's a lot of pluses that have gone into this year. My last question I wanted to ask, and then I'll open up to you, is looking at what you currently do as a profession and what you want to do, what impacts do you think that has on other people's livelihoods, and how does that make you feel, knowing that you have that type of impact on their life?
Yeah, so earlier I talked a little bit about being able to write for different audiences and being able to create digestible information. And one thing that I've really learned is if people don't understand something, they're less likely to engage with a piece of content. And if people don't engage and there isn't a back and forth dialogue, then things aren't really changing. Things are staying very stagnant. And so one thing that I've really learned is the importance of, speaking someone's language so that they engage, so that you can have a conversation, so that you feel like you're really making an impact in that way. And that is a skill that I think, is important for almost any industry, not just, communications or social media related.
I do appreciate the back and forth, the actual dialogue rather than talking to somebody, and sometimes it feels very one-sided when you do social media. I definitely want to congratulate you on finding your kind of niche and your path forward. I think social media is a very rewarding experience. It can be a very difficult one at times, and because sometimes what I struggle with is you lose tone, you lose maybe even some of the emotion behind it, and trying to be able to, in a two-dimensional way, be able to communicate effectively. So, I do appreciate Zooms. I'd love to have done this conversation with you in person. You just lose a little bit of that human touch to it, but we're all figuring it out, I think. So we've got a couple minutes left. Is there anything else you wanted to share with people before we talk 10 years from now?
Oh, wow. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for asking me to do this interview. And again, the reason I wanted to do it is because I sort of wanted to pay it forward to the community leaders who gave me so much confidence that I had as a kid, because honestly, without that, I don't think I ever would have even felt confident enough to apply to college, to, get in and feel like anything is possible and I can, work hard and be whatever that I would like to be. And so for anyone who's watching this, just pay it forward and let a kid know that they're smart and that they inspire you, because if you change your mindset, you can change their entire life.
Well, Nkongho, thank you for your words of wisdom. It's good to have you here on the show, saying it better than I could ever phrase it. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks so much.
For all you watching Hometown Heroes here on PAC 14, we thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to nominate someone to appear on Hometown Heroes, please contact George Whitehead at giwhitehead@salisbury.edu or call him at 410-749-1480. And don't forget, you too can be a hometown hero on PAC 14.